Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you will be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest today is Jennifer Goetz. Jennifer, for people that don't know who you or your family are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
Sure. I live in Brentwood, Tennessee, a suburb of Nashville. My husband, Marty Goetz, is a Jewish gospel singer, and my daughter, Misha, is too, for that matter. And together as a family, we've been traveling and singing since before Misha was born. And as soon as she was born, I would hold her in my arms and we would sing together. But yeah, Marty has sung in churches all over the world and conferences and Messianic congregations, and I'm his manager.
And then for people who listen to this that say, I'd like to go and check out some of their music, where can they go and do that?
We have a website, Marty Goetz, and Goetz is spelled Goetz, martygoetz.com. And actually, ever since COVID, we've been broadcasting twice a week from our living room, and it's called House of Worship. And it's two 1-hour concerts, one on Tuesday and one on Friday, where we celebrate the Shabbat. And Marty takes requests for songs, and it's just a beautiful time of ministry and worship. And people have become friends on like Facebook. We do it on Facebook Live, but then it's always there to go back to. And it's on YouTube as well, live. And then you can always go back to it. But yeah, it's been a great time. So that's how you can find Marty and Misha and me.
Okay, I will put some of those links in the description box. So for people listening, they'll be there ready for you to go and check out.
So Jennifer, look, before we catch up with your family and your travelling, etc., tell us a bit about your story before that all set off, either before you met Marty or just take us on a bit of journey.
Sure. Okay. Well, I was born in New York City, and I lived there till I was 5, and my dad was an actor. So when we moved out of New York, we moved to a suburb called Tenafly, New Jersey, which is just about 10 minutes from New York City. And I was raised in a Jewish home, but it was not religious. My grandparents were religious, but my parents were not, which was very typical of second generation Russian Jews. And so in New Jersey, my best friends across the street were Roman Catholic. And I did not grow up believing in God. I grew up being told that when you died, you became worm food. And somehow that didn't quite sit right with me. So my little Catholic friends, when I would go over to their house, they would say the rosary. So to this day, this little Jewish girl can say the rosary. And they had these beautiful prayers you prayed before you ate. And I would love going to their house and saying prayers with them. And I remember I wished I could have gone to confession too. It just sounded so great to be able to confess your sins to someone. But when I was 14, I was babysitting. My parents owned a 2-family home, and people lived upstairs, a man and a woman and their 1-year-old daughter, Jennifer. And as I was babysitting for her, it was 11:30 at night, I got a phone call from her dad, saying, please don't leave Jennifer alone. Anita's been in a serious car accident and she may not live. And I called my parents up, who were downstairs, and they came upstairs. I went downstairs, and I wrote on a piece of 8x10 paper. I still have that paper today. It was a prayer to God saying, if there is a God, please let her live. And I woke up to someone saying, she's dead, she's dead. And I remember at 14 just saying, I guess there's no God. I guess it's all just up to fate. You know, if I had just kept Anita here, that was her name, 20 seconds longer, she would not have been at that street corner, crossing that street when that car came by and hit her. And so I just started, I think I fell into a pretty deep depression, feeling, partially responsible. What could I have done? And then a friend of mine visited from California when I was 15, came to New Jersey, and she brought with her grass and pot and hash and all those things. So it was 1969. I'm 15 years old. And that's what I did for the next 10 years. And, and it was drugs, sex, and rock and roll. That's really what it was. And I had a boyfriend who was in a band with my brother and my cousin and Tony Bennett's kids called Quacky Duck and his Barnyard Friends. And I was about 19, 20 years old. And a friend of mine took me to a club in New York City. And he said, see those people on stage? I said, yes. He said, they're going on the road with Bob Dylan. They're going to be his backup band. So I said to my friend, if I bring David down here, can you introduce him? Because David would be a great addition to this band. And so the next night, David came down and he went backstage at this club called the Bitter End in New York City and basically auditioned for Bobby Newirth. Came out on stage playing the violin, and he was invited to go on the Rolling Thunder Revue, which was Bob Dylan's very famous tour in 1975. And Bob invited all the girlfriends and the wives. So I got to travel in 1975 on a 6-week rock and roll tour with Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and Joan Baez and Allen Ginsberg, a poet, and Ramblin' Jack Elliott. And I was 22 at the time and David was 19. And it was amazing. And then we got to do it again in the spring. And then I moved to California and I got to go on a 6-week European tour with Dylan in 1978. And when it was all over, all this touring, I just felt empty inside. I felt like there's got to be more to life than all the things that the world offers you. Because I also had a catering business that was doing well. And I was really, that put me rather in a place of joy. It put me in a place of desperation and searching and going, there's got to be more. I mean, I'm traveling with the most famous people on the planet for my generation. And certainly someone who has a more menial job, nothing, this exciting, someone who has a menial job, maybe cleaning a house, or certainly they have the same right to the same success and happiness that someone like Dylan and Joni Mitchell have. So there's got to be this common denominator. I mean, I just started thinking there's got to be a common denominator that gives someone like that the same opportunity for joy as someone like this. And I remember I said, I'm giving myself 35 days to find a new way of approaching my life. And in that 35 days, I contracted something called Bell's palsy, where half your face becomes paralyzed. And I didn't know it fell within this 35-day ultimatum I gave myself. But in that time period, Bob Dylan was doing some concerts at the Universal Amphitheater. And he had his psychic pray for me. And she was saying, oh, imagine yellow and orange in these colors. And I thought, oh, that's silly. And then as soon as she finished, Bob Dylan's girlfriend, Mary Alice, prayed for me in the name of Jesus big time. And I remember walking out of that trailer thinking, what was that? And the next day, the Bell's palsy started going away. So in that 35-day period, it's like God kind of started invading my life. And then after I came back from Europe with David from that trip, and I was even more miserable because that's supposed to be like romantic and I was just, anyway, I remember I started breaking out in hives. I said to David, I said, something's after me and I've got to find out what it is. And I broke up with David and I went wild for a few months and went back to New York. And I remember being in Manhattan and closing the door on my friend's apartment because then I went back to Jersey where my parents lived. And I remember when I closed the door, I thought, I've got to be closing a door on a chapter of my life. I have to be, because if I keep going like this, there's not going to be much of a future left for me. And my dad gave me his car to drive back to California. And my brother was with me and we stopped in Texas. And then I stopped at a friend's house in Texas and she gave me a book by C.S. Lewis called Mere Christianity. And I started reading the book in a bar in Austin, Texas. And when I got to page 42, where he said, Jesus was either who he claimed to be. He was either who he claimed to be, which was God, or he was a raving lunatic as crazy as a poached egg because he allowed people to worship him. And I don't know where he brought this in, but I have it in my brain that he brought in this idea that, or this is how I interpret it, that Jewish people, even to this day, will say that Jesus was a wise man, a teacher, maybe even a prophet. But what C.S. Lewis said was that, no, he was either who he was or he was a megalomaniac. And so I realized, as a Jew, I can't call him a wise man. He was either who he claimed to be or he was a lunatic. And I just could not pull my face out of that book. So my brother drove to California and I'm just reading this book. And my friend, T-Bone Burnett, took me to a church called the Vineyard. He said, you need to go to church, because I think I told him maybe I was a believer. And he took me to church and a fellow named Keith Green was singing. And when he finished singing and we went to the back of the church, there was Bob Dylan and Mary Alice, his girlfriend. I said, what are you doing here? She said, what are you doing here? I said, I got saved. She said, so did I. I said, why didn't you return my phone calls? She said, I thought you were going to drag me down. And then she said, girl, you got to go to discipleship school. And I said, I need a job. And she said, seek first the kingdom of God and all else will be added unto you. And I thought to myself, well, if that's what the Bible says, and I'm saying I believe in him, that means I'm saying I believe in what he says. So if I'm believing in what he says, then yes, I don't have to worry about a job. I can go to Bible school. And it was just amazing. What's so funny is someone called me and said, Jenny, do you want to help me clean houses? Because I had a catering business. I'd worked as a production assistant on some low budget movies. And she said, do you want to help me clean houses? And I thought, me, Jennifer Yaffe, clean houses? Oh, she must be kidding me. And then I'm in Bible school and I need work. And someone else called me and said, Jenny, there's a house I clean. I'm giving it up. It takes me 4 hours. They pay me $40. Do you want it? And I thought, wow, 1979, 4 hours, that's $10 an hour. That's a lot of money. I went, yeah, I'll do it. And what was so amazing was in this little classroom that we had at Bible school, it was only 12 people. Bob was in the class too. I remember saying, am I supposed to tithe? I only make $40 a week. And the pastor said, yes, because if you believe it's from God and if you believe it's from God, then yeah, you do. You tithe. So I remember going into the office and putting $4 into that little basket. And the next day I got a call. Hey, Jenny, I have a house to clean. You want to clean my house? And in that year, I watched my little $4 tithe go up to like $32 a week, which was a lot of money back in those days. But what's more important, I saw God increase my business and be faithful every single step along the way. And so Bob Dylan ended up in my class for 5 months. 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, Bob and his girlfriend and me and 9 other people. And then I met Marty in 1981, and we were married 3.5 years later.
So
And
can I jump in there?
please jump in.
Because now you're getting into the Marty era. I just want to ask you a question to clarify something, really. So here you are, a Jewish girl, and you become a Christian. That is the concept that many people have. Now, I recognise that you were not religious, so maybe that wasn't just as much a big gap. But can you clarify us, what is this that happens when a Jew, and I'm just quoting, becomes a Christian? What goes on there?
Well, I'll tell you, it's amazing because I remember when I started reading the Bible after I got saved, and I read about the Passover in the Bible. And I thought to myself, what's that doing in the Bible? I thought it was just in our little Haggadahs that we would use on Passover, because we did celebrate Passover every year and Hanukkah. But I did not realize that the Bible had all this Jewish stuff in it. So as a believer, even from those early days, I'm not sure. I know I would tell people I was born again. I don't know that I ever actually called myself a Christian. I think I called myself a born again Jew. And then I read Dan Juster's little booklet called Jewishness and Jesus, which is so interesting. And the very first paragraph is, why is it that someone who's born Jewish can call themselves a Buddhist or study transcendental meditation? And by the Jewish community, they're still considered Jewish. But as a Jew, if you say you're a follower of Jesus, you're no longer Jewish, considered Jewish by the Jewish community. For me personally, my family did not reject me. They rejected the things I said. I said to my Mom, you either follow the devil or you follow God. I mean, that's, really good way to bring it up. But they did not like that, but they loved me. And they were liberal Jewish family. And they said, my mother would say, if it makes you happy, that's all that matters. But don't try to force it on us. But yeah, I never felt like I had converted to Christianity. If anything, I felt like I was more I was like a fulfilled Jew. That was a word they used to use back in the 70s. I don't know what it is, but I would call myself a Jewish believer.
Yeah. I'm as a Gentile, I know that it's important to many people to really understand what happens and understand the significance for somebody who's Jewish, accepting that Jesus, Yeshua, is the Messiah, and not that they're being kidnapped into Christianity. And
I mean, today it seems like it's a surprise to people or something spectacular when a Jewish person comes to know Yeshua as the Messiah. But then biblically, it was the other way around. It was a surprise that Gentiles could believe that he was the Messiah. Yeah,
it was amazing to even read the in the New Testament. I remember reading the genealogy, and there's all these Hebrew names in there, all the Jewish people from the Old Testament. And I remember at the very last one, Abraham and Adam, and then it says born of God. I mean, I remember when I read that, it blew my mind. No, I was just amazed reading the scriptures, how much of it was Jewish. And the first book I read when I got saved was the book of Romans, oddly enough. I mean, I don't know what led me to it, but that's all, he's speaking to the Jews, I believe, in Rome. And so that was just so interesting that was the first New Testament book I read.
Wow. So then you met Marty.
Oh, yeah.
How did you meet Marty? Was it through the music scene?
No, it was, we went to a mutual friend's wedding. But what's funny is the night before the wedding, the Vineyard had Jews for Jesus come to their Friday night service. And these were not large services, maybe 100 people. And I remember standing talking to someone, and I do remember Marty behind the person. And he had long hair and he was suntan. And I remember thinking, who's that scruffy looking guy? And then the next day, we were at a mutual friend's wedding, and he was walking through the kitchen with a friend of his. And he said, do I know you? And I said, I don't think so. We kind of kept going back and forth. And I didn't realize that I had seen him the night before. But we did not talk through the wedding. But when it was over, he bumped into me and he said, can I call you? And I looked at him and I said, I'm in the phone book under Yaffee, Yaffee. And he paused and I paused. I said, I'm Jewish. And I didn't know he was Jewish. I knew nothing about him. But my last name is odd. And so I just said I'm Jewish because that's what it is. And he looked my name up in the phone book. And he called me 2 weeks later on Shavuos from Temple. And he left a voicemail. He said, it's Marty. It's Shavuos. And I'm at Temple. And I thought, what is Shavuos? I don't even know what Shavuos is. But he thought he was impressing me because I was Jewish. He says that's a good come on line. But
just
anyway,
to clarify as well, you're not talking about the phone book in your phone. Right?
No, it was a paper telephone book, and I had an answering machine. But we finally went out for a walk, a 3.5-hour walk, a couple of weeks later, and I felt, and he did too, that we were joined at the hip. I felt like he was my brother, like a relative. I felt that close to him that, like, he was going to his brother's wedding. And I thought, wait, I'm supposed to go with you. But, and it wasn't until 3.5 years later that we got married because Marty was scared to make a commitment. But it was a great 3.5 years. I learned how to really hear God and really trust God in places that were really hard. Yeah.
So when did things start to take off as far as Marty and music, and then of course involving your whole family?
Well, he has made his living in music since college. And he's just one of those very fortunate people. And I remember when I met Marty, I didn't know what he did. After that 3.5-hour walk, we were in Hollywood. And I thought, what do you do? And I even asked him as we were sitting on my outdoor step, I said, what do you do? And he said, oh, I play the piano for a lady named Debbie Boone. And there was an artist named Debbie Boone at the time who had a huge hit called You Light Up My Life back in the 70s. And he was her pianist and conductor. And I went, oh, okay, nice. I thought maybe you were an actor because you're a little bit, flamboyant. But then he took me to church with him. And I remember when he played the piano in the Sunday school, I remember the Lord just spoke to me and said, he's mine, his, not mine, his. I remember that. And I went, wow, that was interesting. And it was apparent that Marty had this amazing gift, an anointing. And he wrote good songs too, some of the best songs I've ever heard, and some really bad songs too. But he obviously had a gift, and he was working for Debbie Boone. And then when he and I got married, well, we weren't married yet. There was a show on TBN called Nightlight. It was kind of a Christian style Saturday Night Live. And we went to a church, and Todd Fisher, who's Debbie Reynolds' son, had put together these 1-hour programs for TBN. And I was Todd's production assistant, and Marty came out in one of the skits and played the piano and sang a song, and it was broadcast on television. And that was when people first started really recognizing him. And that was in 1982. And then we got married in 84, and I was working at Paramount Pictures, and I knew not to quit. I said, I want to quit my job and just manage, handle Marty's stuff. And he said, don't do it. It was a pastor, and it was great advice. I thought it was great advice. He said, don't quit your job until you know that Marty can take care of you. And so I stayed there for another year. And at the end of that year, I stopped my job at Paramount and started working with Marty. And it was like you. His gift made a way for him. People would call us and invite him to come and sing. We did not pursue anything for over 35 years. It all came to us. And
so was he a believer already when you originally met?
He'd known the Lord for about 3 years, and I knew the Lord for 2 years when we met. And God just continued to open up doors of opportunity for us that truly we could not have done for ourselves. We came to England once, and I wonder, are you familiar with a ministry there called Sozo?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
They brought Marty in once to England, and it was great. It was about probably 10 years ago at least.
Whereabouts did you go?
Is there a place called Bromley?
Bromley, yeah.
Bromley. Huh. Where is that? I think that's where we were.
Near London.
It's in the country, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's near London. It's somewhere down there.
Where are you guys?
We're in Cambridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we went up to Cambridge just for a trip to see the college up there, right?
Yeah.
Cambridge University.
Cambridge University.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
The best uni in the world, but I may be a little biased.
So
you've got a beautiful country over there.
So
I hope you can keep it too.
Yes. So Jennifer, what would you say? You've had kind of manoeuvred in and out and through and round music in all different shapes, forms, with people. What would you say are a few things that you have learned along the way that you would say, these are life lessons that I have learned?
Well, success gets you nothing. Fame is worth nothing. Talent isn't really. I discovered that the only thing that's worth anything is Jesus. I mean, to be honest with you, that is it. Having had the excitement and the, having had the excitement of traveling with those people and having had success in our career. And when I say success, I mean, we were never with a record label. We've always done our own things, but having God open up doors, to be with Billy Graham in Central Park and standing on a stage in front of 250,000 people, even in the Christian world, people are looking for success.
Yeah.
And I would just say, forget it. That's not what you should be looking for. You look to do the thing, if you're fortunate enough to find out what God has for you. He puts he puts in each of us a gift. He who began a good work in you will complete it. And it's good to try to find out what that work is. It might be cleaning toilets. I loved cleaning people's homes. I loved organizing their homes. I still like organizing homes, but there's no such thing as success. The only thing that is success is knowing Jesus. That's the only thing that anybody should be striving for, to be a friend of his, and to that's really that's it. I mean, and I don't know that I would feel that way. I think as a believer, I would have been looking for success in the Christian world too, because that's just kind of the way we're built, to want to be known. And I think in the Christian world, it's easy for people to fall into that. But because I traveled so much with those secular people and saw it in its fullness, it never meant anything to me,
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that.
I guess it's, what is success? And, often we define our success based off of world's standard of success.
Exactly.
Whereas really what you're saying is, what is success? It's being faithful to what God has told you to do. And wherever that takes you, ultimately that is success, because you're remaining faithful to what God has told you to do.
Yeah. And you shouldn't, like in music, it's just, it's all about being faithful to what God is calling you to do. That is what success is. And it can't be measured in numbers. It can't be measured in finances, although even, numbers, we're tempted. And we're tempted to think that is the measure of our success. And we just have to know that as long as we're being faithful to what God has called us to, those things don't measure your success. It's knowing that you're being obedient to what he is calling you to do.
And even measuring your success against other people's success.
Exactly.
You can't measure what you're meant to do against someone else. You're an individual who God's called individually to do something.
And I would say we have a Western view of success, not an Eastern view. And right now, success is being faithful even unto death in many nations. That is success. It's I'm stuttering. It's success, not denying him.
Absolutely.
Under great pressure. And so I think we often have, we measure it in Western ways, in a way that in Eastern countries, as believers, they wouldn't care whether they were standing in front of 50, 60,000. They just care that when the knock comes on the door, they're going to be faithful even unto death. And I think it's very sobering when we take a look as well at biblically what is success. And it's
the Hall of Fame in the book of Hebrews, it's all those that were martyred.
Yeah.
I mean, Marty has a song called Let Us Run. And it's all based on that scripture about let us run the race of endurance. Can you see how we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses? It's just, they were successful.
And I suppose ultimately the success is the well done, good and faithful servant, and that we receive crowns to lay back at his feet. Mm-hmm. That is the ultimate success, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
so you, jumping forward a bit in your story, you end up having Misha.
Yes.
And now, we talked to Misha a little bit about this when we had her on, and maybe for people listening, I'll put her episode in the description box as well, so you can listen to that. But was there any intentionality from, I guess, maybe Marty on a musical side to put that into Misha, or did she just naturally do it because of the example of her dad? How did that play out?
I'm sure a lot of it had to do with that, but from the time, so there were a couple songs that I would sing with Marty. So from the time Misha was born, I would hold her in my arms while I was singing those songs with Marty. And as soon as she could talk, she would join us on the microphone. And so it would always be the three of us at that point, as she was a toddler growing up. And then she really developed a voice of her own, and my voice just started disappearing. And I just said, go for it. You sing with your dad. I'm just going to sit here and make sure it sounds good with the technical people. And so she really did start singing more with her dad. And then it was her idea, I think, to do the album Le Dor Va Dor. So much of what's going on in our life right now is a result of Misha, because Marty and I had hit a point.
Sorry, the Le Dor Va Dor, can you just say what that means for people?
Oh, Le Dor Va Dor. Le Dor Va Dor means from generation to generation. And Marty and Misha did an album probably 4 or 5 years ago. And it's songs that they wrote together. And it was songs that they wrote together, and a couple that Marty wrote by himself. But they're a great team. I mean, she works for us too now. And as I was saying, if it weren't for her, I don't think we would have produced anything in the last 8 years, because Marty and I, you see, generation to generation, we needed her to pull us forward, because we were almost content. We didn't know what to do. Honestly, a lot of our church engagements were beginning to slow down because the pastors have retired, and there's a new generation of pastors in that don't know Marty, don't know his music. And so basically a lot of people we worked for were retired or passed or deceased. And Marty and I were just saying, you know what? When the churches stop calling, I guess we'll just stop going, and that'll be it. And Misha and her husband, Josh, said, you should start leading tours to Israel. And I didn't want to do that, but they did all the work for us to get it done. And we led a tour to Israel back in 2018. And it was Misha's idea to do a concert over there. So we did a full concert outdoors overlooking Jerusalem, although it's night, so you can't see it that well, but with an orchestra. All that was my daughter's idea. And then we did get to lead a second trip to Israel, but because of COVID, we can't. And then when COVID hit, all of our work stopped. And Marty said, why don't we just do something from our living room? And Misha said, okay. And like right then and there that night, because she's young and can see a big picture, she set us up to do it. And we've done 117 so far. And we needed her to pull, and generation to, it's such an interesting thought, because you pour into your children. And then at this time in our lives, she's kind of the one that's pulling us along too, though. It's great.
But I always say they're a prophetic generation. And I want to be on the cutting edge of the prophetic. I don't want leaving behind. So I'm going to be right in there. But yeah. I think you might be entering into a new era still.
Yeah. Well,
I think you become generation to generation to generation.
Exactly. And well, I'll tell you, what's interesting for me personally is for years I was, I'm the one that when we went and did a concert, I would talk to the sound man. I would make sure it was right. I did all the business. And if Marty would ever say to me, do you have anything to say? I would always say no. With our house of worship, I'll sit with him at the piano a lot. He likes me there. I'm not a very good singer, but he'll have me sing some worship songs with him. But God has put a heart in me for prayer, which I didn't even really know was there. And it's not long. And I think the reason I would never pray at prayer meetings is because some people would pray so long. I didn't want to add to it, But Marty will say, will you pray for the people? And I know that what's coming out of me is really God's heart for these people and for our nation. And so that's been a brand new thing for me. I'm not the person yelling at the sound man anymore. I'm able to actually, minister to the people that are watching us, and they like it, which always surprises me when they say nice things to me, like, I really enjoyed your prayer. You really said what was on my heart. It's encouraged me because I've just been so quiet for so many years, being happy to be behind the scenes,
Well, I think I saw your little grandson singing.
He's
singing prophetically.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. He does. I mean, I don't know if Misha posts videos of him, but Marty was asked to write a song for 9/11, which is going to be released in a couple of days. But one of the lines in it was, people covered in smoke and ash, cities, people covered in smoke and ash, cities covered in dust, or dust and ash, cities covered in smoke and ash. Anyway, Caleb heard Marty singing that. Caleb's our 5-year-old grandson. And he said, wait, Papa, wait. I don't think it should be cities covered in smoke and ash. I think it should be cities covered with the glory of God. And then Caleb just went on to do a whole verse about cities covered with the glory of God. And then he goes on and starts talking about the devil, but the glory of God is bigger than the devil. He's interesting. I don't know what God has for him, but I think you're right, generation to generation to generation.
Yeah. So
I did see that video. I think I watched it a few times. I was like, I'll skip back. I want to watch that one again. It was so funny seeing him telling Marty, no, don't do that one. Change that word. Do that. Okay, now sing it for me.
Yes. And Misha only posted part of it. I should tell you should post the whole thing because it's pretty interesting to watch this little 5-year-old's brain. But that's the beauty of Marty. Caleb and Marty have sat at the piano, since Caleb was probably about 2.5. And Caleb would sing and Marty would play. And it's just such a wonderful thing to see. So, yeah.
But I look forward to seeing Caleb and Misha and Marty together.
Yep.
And I'm interested, before we start winding up, to know how much of what Caleb said did Marty actually put in the song?
Or was the song actually finished at that point?
The song was finished.
Well, maybe it'd be interesting for Caleb to sit there and just give the instructions and Marty just roll it out. That would be very interesting.
That would be funny. Yes, it's next time Misha comes with Caleb, that would be good. That would be good. And even if, that would be good. I'd like that.
Well, whatever it is, just you tell me, son, and we'll just roll this out and we'll go with it. And you never know what the outcome might be.
He's gotten a little more shy for some reason when he knows the camera is on him. But wow, I mean, we did a Passover Seder and he just kept talking and he would pray. And yeah, he's just amazing.
I think I remember one video of you about to sing a song at Passover. Or was it
Yeah.
Shabbat? I don't know. And he was like, are we going to sing my song? As if it was his.
Yes.
Are we singing my song now?
He's not shy.
It's so funny.
Yeah. Aw.
Well, Jennifer, we appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us, sharing some of your story. I know that maybe there's people out there that are familiar with Marty and Misha and some of what they're doing. So it's been interesting to dive into your backstory and hear more about your journey with the family. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate
You're welcome.
it.
Thank you for having me. You're
Thank
welcome.
you,
Thanks
Jennifer.
for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If it inspired you, please rate us and subscribe on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast platform.